Well, I was in the broadcast program at the university in the late '60s, and it was the time that the Marshall McLuhan's "Medium is the Message" came, or "The Media is the Message" came out, and at that time, I mean, what they told us, I don't know if this went on all over the country. They said, "Okay, that's there, but don't read it; it will mess up your mind." And I don't know if they were doing the trick to make you read it, or but it wasn't an assigned book. But of course, I read it. If it's out there, I go read it. And maybe it did mess up my mind, but he doesn't talk about storytelling as we're talking about it here. But I guess the thing that they were saying, I mean, he's saying that the medium, the introduction of television, had just television itself had a much bigger impact on individuals and the culture than the stories that were being told by and you say the same thing about being a personal storyteller. And go back to my third grade. It keeps coming up. Maybe because my third grade teacher, Mrs. Groh, was, I think, the best, at least grade school teacher that I had. And she came to me one day in the media center, and uh, and I don't know if this was random or if she had some innate sense. Bloomington at the time, everybody was white. There was no cultural diversity, certainly no African American people. But she handed this book to me, and she said, "You're a better reader than the other children. You should be reading books like this." And I mean, I was pleased she did it, privately. So it's not like, making you stand out. And she gave me Carver's George, the landmark version of the story of George Washington Carver. And I loved that book. I mean, we had a garden at home, but the story of this I mean, and it's much bigger. I've been to Tuskegee 3 or 4 times whenever I'm down that way, and I have many adult versions of the story. And if people know anything at all, it's, oh, the guy that made a bunch of things out of peanuts. Well, it was like they had ruined the southern soil by growing cotton year after year after year. And he determined, right after the Civil War, he determined that growing soybeans, peanuts, legumes restored nitrogen to the soil rather than taking it out. And people couldn't afford a cow or commercial fertilizer, so he got everybody to grow peanuts and soybeans. And then there was no place to sell them, so he went into his laboratory, brilliant, and figured out products that they could make out of those things so people could sell their crops. I mean, that's the short version of the longer, complex story. Well, I, started telling that story and any story I could about people from other cultures. I mean, few people know, even to this day, that the person who found the filament that finally burned so we could have a light bulb was Lewis Howard Latimer, a veteran and a brilliant African American scientist in Edison's lab. But it's still, who invented the light bulb? Thomas Edison. Well, yeah, I guess he had the idea, but rarely do you hear about Lewis Howard Latimer. And so I've always tried to tell those stories, but I'm a and I guess there's a certain message to that, but I'm still a person that, especially in Minneapolis urban schools, a person that doesn't look like in many cases, a majority of the students in front of me. So one year I was in a school where there was the second music teacher was half-time, and she was an African-American woman, and I thought a very wonderful teacher. But, coming on the end of the year, I could see it. It happened to me. It happened to everybody. She was going to be laid off because she had no tenure. And I thought, well, I had done a lot of things with storytelling, independent work before I went to work for the schools. And I thought, I could cut my time and just work on my own to make up the difference. And so I volunteered to go to halftime so she could keep her job. And I'm thinking I'm still working there doing what I do, and then they can keep this person who is African American. Well, I get this thing. Well, that's not the way it works. You can demote yourself if you want to, but that doesn't mean that she's going to get the job. It goes to the next person in line for tenure. And first of all, kind of harsh language, demote yourself. Why don't you go demote yourself? uh, but also just the system. And I've never argued for eliminating protections for teachers, because they get dumped on enough. And I don't know where this is at exactly nowadays, but I just think there should be more provision for making the overall teaching staff look more like the group of students that are coming through the system. And so that the medium, the storyteller, the teacher, the medium is as much the message as what's delivered by the curriculum.